have you ever come home from the hospital, only to find your whole world shifted? I'm Marjorie Kline. I spent 10 days fighting for breath in a hospital bed, only to return and realize the real storm hadn't passed, it had just moved indoors. My car was gone. My son had answers that didn't add up. And that afternoon? It was the first time I truly feared the boy I raised. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. I still remember that afternoon like it was folded into yesterday. Toledo was bone cold, the kind of cold that slides under your coat and clings to your ribs. The sky was a dull gray blanket. I was bundled in a hospital-issued coat 2 sizes too big, stepping gingerly onto my porch after 10 days laid up with pneumonia. The ambulance had dropped me off without fanfare, and the driver gave a quick nod before speeding off. I stood there, cane in one hand, plastic bag of prescriptions in the other, waiting for the warmth of familiarity to sink in. But something was off. The driveway was empty. At first, I told myself maybe Kenton had parked my car around the block, maybe he was washing it, maybe he needed to run an errand. Maybe. That was the voice I'd perfected over the years. The voice that translated disappointment into excuses. I walked up the path slowly. My hip still ached, and the cold made it worse. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like reheated meatloaf and unwashed laundry. I called out, "Kenton?" Nothing. Just the dull hum of the old fridge and the heater kicking in with a groan. I dropped into the recliner, breathing through the tightness in my chest, not from illness this time, but from something heavier. Absence. Kenton wasn't there. He knew I was coming home. I'd told him the discharge time. The nurse had even confirmed it with him. But there I was, alone, aching, wondering where the hell my only son had gone. 20 minutes later, I heard his car door slam. He shuffled in, jacket unzipped, hair messy, holding a convenience store coffee. No eye contact. No apology. "Where's the Malibu?" I asked gently, but there was steel under the question. My voice was hoarse from being on oxygen, but the weight behind it hadn't dulled. He didn't pause. Took it to get serviced. Oil was leaking bad. I looked at him then, really looked. His eyes darted toward his phone as it buzzed in his hoodie pocket. He didn't flinch, didn't offer to let me talk to the mechanic, didn't say where the car was exactly. Just gave that shrug he's mastered over the years, the one that says, "Don't push it, Mom. Let it go." My chest tightened, but not from the infection. That shrug had followed me through every stolen $20 bill, every broken promise, every time I'd told myself, he just needs time. But this time, my instincts flared like a smoke alarm. The Malibu wasn't just a car to me. It was the last thing Henry gave me before he passed. My husband had driven that car off the lot in 2010, grinning like a teenager, and said, "Now you've got something reliable for once, not just me." It was the one place I still heard his laugh, the one place I could cry without anyone asking why. And now it was gone? Kenton flopped onto the couch, took a swig of coffee, and muttered, "You should get some rest, Mom. You look beat." I wanted to scream, but instead, I nodded. I'd been taught to keep the peace. Even in my own home. Especially in my own home. But something inside me shifted. A quiet, unsettling tremor in the place where I used to store patience. Later that night, while he was out, wherever he goes when the sky turns black, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the empty spot in the driveway. My fingers wrapped around the edge of my mug so tightly my knuckles ached. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive. I just didn't want to believe it. That's the curse of a mother, we'll believe in them long after they've stopped believing in us. Still, deep down, I knew something had snapped loose. Not in the world, not in Kenton. In me. I'd spent so many years patching over the cracks, telling myself things weren't as bad as they looked. But now, I was starting to see the whole damn wall was crooked. I didn't say anything that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of tires crunching gravel. But the only thing I heard was the wind scraping against the old aluminum siding. And in that silence, something unfamiliar settled in, not fear, not grief, resolve. Back then, I didn't know that hospital stay wouldn't be what broke me, it would be what rebuilt me. 2 days after I came home from the hospital, I decided to water the tomato vines out back. I wasn't supposed to be on my feet much, but I needed to do something normal, something grounding. There's a certain silence that comes with getting older, not just in the house, but inside your own head. It sneaks in during long afternoons, when the TV's off and your children don't call. I leaned on my cane and shuffled toward the small garden I'd kept alive mostly out of habit. Across the fence, Ramona Deal was plucking ripe tomatoes into a chipped blue colander. She was in her usual house dress, her silver-gray hair pulled back with a red bandana. I hadn't spoken to her much since the pandemic, just a wave here and there. She looked up and smiled. "Well, look who's out and about," she said, walking over to the fence. "You're not supposed to be upright yet, are you?" I gave her a half smile. I figured the tomatoes weren't going to water themselves. She nodded toward my porch. "Kenton around?" I hesitated. "He's been busy." Ramona wiped her hands on her apron, then leaned in, dropping her voice like she was sharing neighborhood gossip. "I didn't mean to snoop, Marjorie. But I saw someone driving your Malibu last Monday. Young fella I didn't recognize. Thought maybe you loaned it out." My heart dropped. She said it so casually, but to me, it sounded like a door slamming shut. Monday. I was still in the hospital then. Still hooked up to machines, trying to breathe through mucus and fever dreams. And someone else had been driving my car? "I didn't loan it to anyone," I said quietly. Ramona's face shifted, subtle, but telling. She looked away for a second, then back. I thought it was odd. I figured, maybe Kenton, but I didn't want to assume. "Thank you," I said. My hands were shaking. "I appreciate you telling me." She gave me a look, soft but serious. "You all right, Marge?" I nodded, lying. "Just tired." But inside, everything was spinning. That car wasn't just transportation. It was the last birthday gift Henry ever gave me. He died a year after that. Pancreatic cancer took him fast and mean. He'd spent weeks researching that model, comparing mileage and safety ratings like it was a sacred mission. When he pulled into the driveway with a bow on the hood, he said, "Now you've got something dependable to get you around." Unlike me, I never drove that car without thinking of him. The seat still had the dent from where he used to sit. I hadn't even changed the radio presets. And now, some stranger had been behind that wheel while I was hooked up to oxygen. Later that afternoon, I waited until Kenton came in from wherever he'd disappeared to. He had his hoodie pulled up, earbuds in, and a 7-Eleven bag in his hand. I met him at the door. "Kenton," I said, steady as I could. "Ramona said she saw someone driving the Malibu last week." "Who was it?" He didn't even flinch. "I told you. It was getting worked on." "That's not what I asked." He dropped the bag on the counter. "Jesus, Mom. You're obsessed with that damn car." "It's just a car." "You act like it's a shrine." "It is to me," I said, voice thin but firm. It mattered. He threw his hands up. "It's always something with you. I'm trying to help and you treat me like I'm stealing from you." The room went quiet. My stomach turned. And for the first time, I heard a voice in my head I hadn't allowed myself to hear before. One that whispered something terrible, something true. If he can sell your car while you're lying in a hospital bed, what won't he do next? It wasn't just the car. It was the pattern. The slow erosion of boundaries. The way he'd borrow money and forget to pay it back. The way he used guilt as currency. The way I let him. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the porch light glowing through the blinds. I stirred honey into my tea with a shaky hand. The house felt colder than usual. Then came a soft knock. I opened the door and found Ramona holding a small tin of lemon cookies. "Thought you could use a little company," she said. I almost said no. I almost did what I always do, smile politely and send her on her way. But instead, I stepped aside. "Come on in. I could use a change of scenery." And just like that, I reached for someone who wasn't Kenton. It felt strange. But it also felt right. It was a Tuesday morning when I finally gave in to the ache in my gut, the kind of ache that doesn't come from illness, but from the gnawing feeling that something's been taken from you and someone you love might have done the taking. Kenton had gone out early, said something vague about running errands, which was usually code for hitting up whoever still answered his calls. The house was quiet. That kind of quiet that made you listen harder, like maybe the walls were trying to whisper something you missed. I stood in the doorway of the garage, arms folded over my sweater, just staring. The smell of oil and old cardboard hit me like a memory. Henry used to keep everything neat in there, labeled bins, tools hung in a perfect line. Now it was a mess. Empty boxes, dusty lawn chairs, junk piled like intentions that never got followed through. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Closure, maybe. Or proof that I was just being paranoid. What I found was a crumpled manila folder shoved behind a stack of unopened mail on Kenton's workbench. Inside, the title for the Malibu. The top corner had been torn clean off. Folded behind it was a handwritten bill of sale, no notary, just a shaky scrawl of numbers and names. $2,500. Sold to a man named Joel Winfrey. Dated 4 days before I was discharged. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was a sloppy attempt, like someone had copied it from a check or an old card. Close, but not right. The J in Marjorie curved the wrong way, and the K in Kline didn't loop the way I'd done it for over 50 years. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. I gripped the workbench until the edge pressed hard against my palm. The garage seemed to spin, walls closing in. He didn't just lie. He didn't just sell my car. He forged my name. He sold a piece of me like it was nothing. I sat down on an overturned bucket, the paper shaking in my hands. Somewhere in my mind, I kept hearing Henry's voice, steady, calm, from another life. "If he ever crosses that line, Marge, you don't owe him silence." But I'd stayed silent through so many things, hadn't I? When Kenton borrowed my savings for a business idea that never happened. When he disappeared for 3 days and came back with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. When he said his ex-wife was out to ruin him and asked for rent money, twice. I told myself I was helping. That mother's sacrifice. That he just needed time. Now, I stared at that crooked signature and felt like the biggest fool God ever made. He came home a few hours later, humming like nothing had happened. Tossed his keys on the table and cracked open a soda. I was waiting in the living room, folder in my lap. I didn't say anything at first. Just held up the paper and watched his face shift. Not surprise, just a twitch of the jaw. Annoyance. "You went through my stuff?" he asked flatly. "You forged my name," I said. My voice didn't even tremble. "I don't know how." He ran a hand down his face. "Look, I needed cash, all right? I'm behind on child support. And it's not like you were driving it. That car wasn't yours to sell. It's not like I junked it. I got a good deal. And I was gonna tell you. When? He didn't answer. I held up the title. This is a felony, Kenton. You know that, right? He scoffed. So what? You gonna call the cops on your own son? Really, Mom? You want me in jail? You want your grandson to grow up without a father. You chose this, I said quietly. Not me. He exploded then, words flying like fists. You think you're some saint? You think I had it easy? You never let me be a man. You always held everything over my head. You owe me for staying. You'd be rotting in a nursing home if it weren't for me. And just like that, something inside me cracked. Not a break. A release. I stood up, knees stiff but steady. If I'm such a burden, Kenton, why are you still here? He stared at me, blinking, lips parted like he'd forgotten how to argue. Then he stormed out. Slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I sat down on Henry's old chair, the one by the window. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave, though maybe that was just memory playing tricks. My hand drifted to the side table, touching the worn ring of a cup stain where he used to set his tea. I used to think that memories fade like old wallpaper, edges curling up, colors softening, until you can barely make out the shape of what once hurt. But some don't. Some sit tight, sharp as broken glass, waiting for the day you're too tired to keep pretending they don't matter. For me, one of those memories bloomed in the spring of 2020. The world was upside down. Toilet paper was gold, streets were empty, and fear floated in the air like pollen. I was baking banana bread and trying to figure out Zoom when Kenton showed up at my door, eyes wild, hands twitching like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't waste time. There's this crypto thing, Mom. Ethereum. It's blowing up. I know a guy, if I get in now, I can double it in 2 weeks. He talked fast, like if he stopped for breath, he'd lose his nerve. I could see the desperation stitched into his words. I just need $5,000. I felt a knot twist in my stomach. That money wasn't for dreams or schemes, it was for medication, for home repairs, for the kind of emergencies that don't announce themselves. For survival. I said no. I remember how proud I was that day, standing my ground, feeling my voice hold firm for once. But pride is a fragile thing. That night, while I was asleep, he found the key to the desk drawer. My checkbook was in there, tucked beneath the old photos and the last letter Henry ever wrote me. The next morning, I opened the drawer and found it empty. The check was gone. Written to cash. Signed, not sloppily like with the car, but carefully. Like he'd practiced. When I confronted him, my voice cracked. How could you? He didn't even deny it. If you call the cops, he said, I'll kill myself. I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't risk not believing. So I stayed quiet. I curled up under my covers and cried until the corners of the pillow were damp and cold. A week later, he brought me a sandwich from Arby's and mumbled an apology. I took the food and said thank you. And just like that, I stuffed the betrayal down deep, told myself it was love. But this time felt different. A few days after I found the forged car documents, Ramona invited me over for tea. Her house smelled like cinnamon, dust, and something faintly floral, like the kind of potpourri people only use when they expect company. She poured chamomile into mismatched cups and set out oatmeal cookies that were too hard for my teeth but too kind to refuse. She looked at me for a long moment. You've been quieter lately. I gave a small smile. It's just been a lot. She didn't press, just waited, like she knew eventually I'd get tired of holding it in. And I did. I told her about the car. About the forged sale, the yelling, the feeling like I was going crazy in my own home. Not all of it, but enough. She sighed. I used to lie for my boy too. Told people he was tired when he was strung out. Told myself he was stressed when the money disappeared. I thought I was protecting him. But all I did was stand in the way of the consequences. She reached across the table, rested her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm, skin paper thin but strong. You can't save someone who doesn't want saving, Marge. You think it's love, but sometimes it's just fear in disguise. The words sank deep, like water into cracked earth. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent bulb buzzed, flickered like it always did when it was about to go out. My face looked hollow. Like someone had scooped out the light behind my eyes and left just the shape of me behind. Who was I? Not just a mother. Not just a widow. I was a woman who had been swallowing her own screams for years, mistaking silence for strength. I thought of Henry, how he used to hold my face in his hands when I doubted myself and say, "You don't have to be loud to be brave, Marge. You just have to be clear." So I walked into the kitchen, slow but steady. Picked up the phone from the wall like it weighed 100 pounds. For a moment, I just held it, like I had before. But this time, I didn't let go. I dialed. And when the operator picked up, I took a breath and said, steady as I could, "I need to report a stolen vehicle. My name is Marjorie Kline." The officer who came by was named Lopez. He couldn't have been more than 30, trim haircut, pressed uniform, that calm, measured way young officers have when they're still trying to balance authority with compassion. He looked like someone's nephew, the kind you trust to mow your lawn right, the kind who says ma'am without a hint of sarcasm. Seeing his badge on my porch made the whole thing real in a way I hadn't prepared for. I'd called in the report already, explained what I knew, what I suspected, but there was something about seeing that uniform in my living room, next to the faded armchair and the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, that made my chest go tight. Lopez asked a few questions, polite, procedural. I answered on autopilot. Then he stepped outside to check the license plate on the Malibu. Or, I guess, what used to be my Malibu. When he came back in, his face had that same polite shape, but the edges were more serious. He held the printout loosely, like he didn't want to startle me. "Ma'am," he said, "the car's been transferred. It's in someone else's name now, but the transfer wasn't processed through the DMV. Just a handwritten bill of sale." He paused. "That won't hold up legally, especially if the registered owner didn't authorize it." "I didn't," I said, voice flat, as if the words had been waiting by the door before he even arrived. He nodded. "Then we can move forward. This would be considered a theft." You'd think I would have felt vindicated. Maybe even a little stronger. But all I felt was tired. Not the kind of tired that a nap can fix, this was marrow deep. My hands felt heavy, my back ached from holding up too many years that didn't love me back. He flipped the page, hesitated again. "There's one more thing." My stomach tensed. "While we were verifying your name through the system, something came up, a flagged account. An open line of credit for $4,000, issued through a mobile loan app. Tied to your social security number." I blinked at him. "That's a mistake. I haven't opened any credit lines." His voice softened. "It could be fraud. Happens more than folks think. You might want to contact your bank." After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long moment. The screen door creaked gently in the breeze behind me. Then I moved, slow as stone, to the kitchen table. Pulled my laptop out of the drawer, hands trembling as I logged into my bank account. The loading bar crawled. When the page finally opened, I felt the air leave my lungs. There it was, a loan account I'd never seen before, in my name. $4,000. Fully drawn. Gone. Transferred to another checking account 2 weeks earlier. My checking account. I clicked again. The balance glowed up at me, cruel and indifferent, $617.14. That number hit harder than the loan itself. That number was everything left. Grocery money. Roof repair. Prescription refills. The last stretch of Henry's pension. All the quiet little sacrifices I'd made, driving less, eating less, skipping holidays, boiled down to $600 and some loose change. I sat back in the chair. My fingers were ice. Then the puzzle started clicking together, slow, horrifying pieces that had been there the whole time, but I'd refused to see them for what they were. Kenton borrowing my phone to check email. Him saying he'd reset the password for me. The time he asked, real casual, what my mother's maiden name was, just helping you update security stuff. How he always got to the mailbox before I did. I hadn't just left the door open. I'd handed him the keys. I stood too fast, knees shaking under me, and staggered into the den. The room spun a little. I reached for the armchair, Henry's chair. The fabric worn smooth, the seat cushion sagged from years of his weight. I collapsed into it like a woman twice my age. The tears came before I could even try to stop them. Hot, heaving sobs that tore through my throat like they'd been waiting a decade. I cried for the money, yes, but more than that, I cried for every time I'd told myself this was normal. That he needed me. That love meant enduring. I cried for all the birthdays I'd spent alone while he figured things out. For the nights I waited up, the bills I covered, the lies I pretended not to notice. But mostly, I cried for that small, quiet voice inside me, the one that used to whisper, "You deserve more," and had been silenced so long I'd forgotten what it sounded like. Somewhere in that storm of grief, I heard Henry. Not his ghost. Not my imagination. Just his voice, low, steady, the way he used to talk to me late at night when the world pressed too hard. "You've done your part, Marge. You've given more than enough. It's okay to stop now." I wiped my face with the sleeve of my cardigan, rough against my skin. The house around me hadn't changed, the same beige carpet, the same bookshelf with crooked frames, the same silence between walls. But I had. And this time, the tears weren't for Kenton. They were for me. I went to the station the next morning. Not because I wanted to, God knows, I didn't. But because I had to. There's a difference. One is a choice. The other is a line in the sand you cross because not crossing it would mean disappearing into yourself. I wore Henry's old windbreaker. The blue one, with the threadbare collar and the zipper that always snagged halfway up. It smelled faintly of lemon oil and old leather. I didn't wear it for warmth, I wore it because I needed to remember I wasn't alone, even if I was. At the front desk, I handed over the manila folder Lopez told me to prepare. Inside were photocopies of the forged bill of sale, screenshots of the fake loan account, and 3 printed pages from my bank. The clerk, barely out of college, with a nervous smile and a name badge that said Zach, walked me back to a quiet room with cinderblock walls and a clock that ticked louder than necessary. A female officer took my statement. She introduced herself as Officer Green. Steady voice. No nonsense. But not unkind. She asked if I wanted water, then got right to the questions. "Do you know who accessed your banking information?" "Yes," I said. "Do you believe the signature on this document is yours?" "No." "Do you understand this will be classified as a felony-level complaint?" I nodded. I didn't ask for time to think. I didn't look away. I just nodded. Then she turned the paper around and slid it toward me, along with a black pen. "Please sign here to confirm your pressing charges." My hand didn't shake. Not even a little. The pen glided across the page like it had been waiting years to do just that. Marjorie Kline. The signature bled slightly into the grain of the paper, but it held. Sharp. Unmistakable. Mine. They told me Kenton would receive a formal notice within 48 hours. But it only took 6. He showed up just after sunset. The porch light flickered to life as motion sensors caught his steps. His shadow moved across the front window like a slow tide. Then the banging started. 3 hard knocks, angry, impatient. I didn't flinch. I didn't kill the lamps or pretend I wasn't home like I'd done before. I walked straight to the door and opened it. He stood there, breathless, eyes wild. You really did it, he spat. You actually called the cops on me. I kept my voice even. I reported a crime. His laugh was short, sharp, and cracked at the end. You reported your own son. Jesus, Mom. What is wrong with you? You forged my name. You stole my car. You opened a loan with my social security number. That's not just a mistake, Kenton. That's theft. That's fraud. You think I don't know that? His voice rose. You want me locked up? You want me to lose visitation with my son? You want my life to fall apart. And I wanted not to be treated like a bank account with gray hair, I snapped. I wanted my son to love me, not just need me when he's in a hole. That hit him. His jaw twitched. Then he stepped forward, the porch light catching the sweat on his forehead. You're the reason I'm like this. You smothered me. Always watching, always judging. You made me feel like I'd never be enough. I didn't blink. You're not like this because of me. You're like this because you made choices. Grown man choices. And now, you're facing grown man consequences. He stared at me like he couldn't recognize the woman in front of him. You know what, he said, voice dropping. I didn't need you. Not ever. All you ever did was make me feel like a failure. And this time, I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. The weight of it. The truth in it. Finally, I said, you were raised in a house where the lights never went out. Where dinner was always on the table. Where your mother stayed up late balancing checks so you could have a childhood with some dignity. You had love, Kenton. You just didn't recognize it. He looked away. And for a second, I thought he might say something softer. But he didn't. He turned, muttering under his breath as he walked down the steps and out to the street. I didn't ask him to stay. I didn't follow him. I just stood there until his figure disappeared into the shadows. Then I closed the door. No slam. No shaking hands. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed and the sky's still cracked open, but you know it's over. The house felt different, lighter. Like it had exhaled with me. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. I let it go 2 rings before answering. It was Ramona. I heard shouting, she said. You all right? I looked around the living room. Everything's still in its place, but for once, not everything was the same. I'm all right, I said softly. For the first time in a long, long while. I actually am. The preliminary hearing was held in one of those small municipal courtrooms that always smelled like damp paper and decades of disinfectant. The kind of room where even the walls looked like they were trying not to listen. I sat on a hard wooden bench near the front, next to a legal aid attorney with kind eyes and a folder too full to care about mine. He'd skimmed the police report, nodded sympathetically once, and handed me a pen like it was a lifeline. Kenton arrived 10 minutes late. His shirt looked like it had been balled up in the corner of a room for a week. His sneakers were the same ones from the night he screamed at me on the porch, laces untied, soles flapping. He didn't look at me. Not once. Just kept his head low, eyes scanning the floor, like the gravity in that courtroom weighed more than usual. The judge, a woman with a voice like gravel and sharp glasses, read through the complaint, reviewed Officer Lopez's statement, and barely blinked when she signed off on the protective order. Kenton was now legally barred from contacting me in any way. Phone, email, in person. His public defender, clearly overwhelmed and juggling 5 cases too many, leaned in like he was asking for a favor on a crowded bus. Your Honor, given the relationship, mother and son, we'd request mediation. This may just be a family misunderstanding. I turned to the judge. Not to the lawyer. Not to Kenton. To the woman holding the gavel. And I said, clear and steady, no. I won't be withdrawing my complaint. The judge didn't blink. Just nodded once and banged her gavel. It was done. At home, I opened the letter from the credit union. It was stiff, tri-folded, formal, like it was ashamed to be in my kitchen, next to the half-finished crossword and a cup of coffee gone cold. But inside was everything I needed. With a few signatures and a verification call, Kenton was removed from every joint account, every emergency contact list, every digital shadow he'd ever snuck through. I added 2-step verification. Changed passwords I hadn't touched since Henry was alive. I filed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. I even froze my credit entirely. It felt like battening down the hatches before a storm. But oddly enough, the storm had already passed. This wasn't preparation, it was reclamation. And yet, something still pulled at me. Not guilt exactly. More like a knot that needed untying. So the next morning, I called him. I didn't owe him that. But I needed to say my piece on my terms, not in a courtroom, not through lawyers. Can you come by? I asked. Just one more time. He paused, then said, fine. We met in the backyard, under the old sugar maple Henry had planted the second year we bought the house. The leaves hadn't started to turn yet, but the air carried that early October crispness. You could smell wood smoke from a neighbor's fire pit, and the rustle of leaves had a tired kind of music to it. I was already standing when Kenton walked out. He looked older than usual, gray circling his jawline, his eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. He crossed his arms, standing at a distance. I held a slim folder in my hand. I'm moving, I said. He frowned. Where? A retirement place on the west side. Not far from the church. It's small, but it's quiet. I've already put the deposit down. His brow furrowed, like the idea of me making decisions without him was somehow insulting. You're just leaving? I'm starting over. I handed him the folder. Inside were documents, account closures, confirmation of fraud flags, signed statements from the bank. Everything scrubbed clean. Everything locked down. No more shared access, I said. No more emergency logins. No more loopholes. You can't touch my name anymore, not financially, not legally. He didn't take the folder. Just stared at it like it might bite. So that's it, he asked. After everything I've done for you? You mean everything you've taken? He looked away. His jaw tightened. You think I'm some kind of monster? I shook my head. No. I think you're a man who's never learned what a boundary is because I never set one. He stepped forward, voice sharp. So what, I'm just nothing to you now? You're still my son. But I can't keep setting myself on fire so you can warm your hands. He blinked. I loved you enough to give you everything, I said softly. Now I love myself enough to keep what's left. He didn't have a response for that. We stood there in silence. The kind of silence that comes after too much has already been said. I turned back toward the house. My hand reached for the screen door, but I paused and looked over my shoulder. You don't get to come and go anymore, Kenton. You don't get to wound me and expect me to hand you the bandage." He didn't move. He didn't speak. I stepped inside and closed the door. And I locked it. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finally done apologizing for protecting myself. It's been a few weeks since the court hearing. The trees are starting to bloom outside my new apartment window, and the air in West Toledo smells like fresh mulch and early spring. I live in a small one-bedroom unit now, part of a quiet senior housing complex near the old Methodist church. There's a little walking trail around the back and a bench by the pond where cardinals visit in the morning. Each day, I wake up around 6. I make a single cup of coffee, the strong kind Henry used to like, and I sit by the window with a blanket around my shoulders. The world is quieter now, and I don't just mean the neighborhood. There's no banging on the door at midnight. No overdraft alerts. No desperate calls asking for help, then blaming me when I said I didn't have any to give. Some mornings, Yvette, one of the home nurses, drops by with baked goods or helps me take out the trash. She's young and always smells like lavender lotion. She reminds me that kindness still lives in people, even when your own blood makes you forget. I've made a few friends here. Clara from 2B has a loud laugh and keeps forgetting where she puts her glasses. Ben, the war veteran down the hall, insists on walking me to my mailbox like he's still guarding a post. It's not the life I imagined, maybe, but it's mine. As for Kenton, well, my lawyer called last Thursday to update me. Kenton took a plea deal. He was ordered to repay restitution for the forged signature and the unauthorized loan. He's on probation now, under financial supervision. No jail time, but there's a permanent mark on his record. He's tried calling, twice. Sent a few texts too. I didn't block him at first, just muted the notifications. But after the third "you ruined me" message, I hit block and didn't look back. It wasn't out of spite. It was survival. There's a difference between forgiveness and re-entry. I forgive him, honestly, I do. But that doesn't mean he gets a key to my door, or my heart. One night, after dinner, I sat at the little oak desk in my bedroom and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. "Dear Kenton," I began. "You may believe I'm cruel. That I turned on you. But the truth is, this is the first time I've loved you without letting you harm me. Maybe one day you'll understand. Maybe not. Either way, I'm not angry anymore. I just need peace." I folded the letter and slipped it into Henry's old Bible, between Psalm 46 and 2 Corinthians. There's comfort in keeping it close but silent. Not everything needs to be heard to be healed. Sometimes I wonder if Kenton remembers the park we used to visit when he was little, the one with the red slide and the chipped blue swing. He was always fearless, always jumping too far, running too fast. I used to think that was a good thing. Now I realize it's only brave if you know how to land. I don't cry much anymore. When I do, it's not from pain. It's from release. I've learned to let go, not with bitterness, but with mercy. Mercy for myself most of all. This new life is small. Simple. But it's filled with things I'd forgotten I could have: quiet mornings, unbroken trust in my own decisions, and the soft warmth of knowing I don't owe anyone my undoing. I used to think holding a family together meant never letting go. That if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, forgave enough, it would all come back around. But I was wrong. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes peace means walking away. I don't have forever. But I have today. And that's enough. I don't know which part of the story stayed with you. Maybe it was the moment I finally closed the door, or the night I sat alone and cried for myself instead of someone else. But if you've ever given too much, stayed too long, or loved someone who only took, then maybe you understand how long it takes to come back to yourself. I'm not angry with Kenton anymore. Anger is heavy, and I've carried enough. What I want now is peace, the kind you make for yourself, not wait for someone else to give. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved, just to find yourself again? If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me for the next one. Sometimes, all it takes is a quiet voice in the dark to remind us we're not alone.